Hello there and welcome to the English Language Club. We're now live and it's our time for our weekly Hangout session. So if you're joining us for the first time, you're very welcome, as you are if you're joining us not for the first time. But yeah, let us know what you want to talk about today because the floor is open. We don't really plan very much for these sessions, but we rely on your comments, and we're here to answer your questions. So,
yes,
Tony,
that's what we want to do.
Yes, how are you doing, Tony?
I'm doing great. We have so many people already here today that have said hi. Mohammed Noor, hello. Mudassir Khan, welcome back. Fatima Hafra and Siti Fatima. Jorge Lopez, welcome back. Mohammed Noor, yeah, said that already. Balbal, welcome back. And AJ from Monaco. We got so many of our regulars already. This is exciting.
Great. Yep. I love it.
And we already have a couple of questions. So yeah, awesome. Feel free, open. This is kind of an open question thing. We want to answer your questions. We want to know what you guys want us to talk about. And we already have two. They're both pronunciation questions.
Okay. Yeah.
First, Mudassir Khan wants us to read 4 words. So let's do these in British English and American English. That should be fun.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the British pronunciation first?
Okay. Shall I read all 4 of them?
Let's just do one at a time, maybe.
Okay. So the first one is maneuver.
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 Yeah.
It's a word that's very strange. Has a very strange spelling.
Well, that's because it is not an English word. Yeah. It's a French word.
Yeah.
These are called loan words, where there's a word that's not even like ancient English comes from French, but the word maneuver just comes from modern French.
Right. Yeah. 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 So okay, and the next word I think is similar kind of fits into that category as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So rendezvous.
Rendezvous.
Yeah, is there much? What is the difference there between the British and American pronunciation then?
It's just I think the subtleties of how you pronounce it's not really that much difference. Rendezvous.
Yeah, rendezvous. Rendezvous.
Yeah, some of this is also, don't forget, some differences in pronunciation aren't just the differences between British English and American or Canadian English, but also the way Colin pronounces words and the way I pronounce words. Accent is a lot more subtle than maybe most people give it credit for. So always remember that. If you're saying things pretty close, an exact accent is hard or impossible to mimic, but you don't have to. You just have to be in the right neighborhood because accents are all kind of blurred together. Then the last two are kind of, what do you call two words that sound very similar? Not homophones, where they sound exactly the same, but words that sound very similar. I can't
minimal pairs.
Minimal pairs, yes.
Yeah.
So the words are cattle and kettle. Very close. They're only off, even though the C and the K are spelled differently, or they're spelled differently with a C or a K. That's not where the difference in pronunciation is. It's just that first vowel sound.
Yeah.
So cattle, kettle. And again, it's all in the physical way you place your mouth. Right?
Yeah. Now, this word is. I mean, both of these words, cattle and kettle, they could be pronounced in different ways. So because we've got the T sound, which we've talked about in the past, the correct pronunciation would be cattle and kettle, but we do sometimes drop the T. So you could say cattle and kettle. I could imagine a farmer. A farmer might say with that sort of accent, kind of West Country accent, might say cattle or put the kettle on, rather than put the kettle on. That's more like somebody like the Queen might say that.
Yes. And in American or Canadian English, you don't drop the T out entirely. It just becomes more like a D. So instead of cattle, you would say cattle.
Yeah.
Where it's almost blurring the line between a D and a T. And in American English, I wouldn't say that that's wrong or less correct. In fact, I think it's a little weird if you really emphasize the T in American English. You don't say cattle. You kind of blur that T sound. Cattle is probably more correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So good first question to start us off there, Mudasir.
Great. So how?
Got another weird pronunciation one, which is from Balbal. How to pronounce in an unusual, like the saying would be in an unusual circumstance or something like that.
In an unusual circumstance, yeah. In an unusual.
Yes.
It's tricky because you've got the lots of A's and N's. and.
Yes.
In an unusual.
And there's a word for this too, where the sound. It's phrases like this where we get phrases like mumbo jumbo and babble. There's sounds where it just sounds like you're just kind of making random sounds. It doesn't sound like it ought to be words, but it's really just an odd pairing. One of the problems here, people have asked a lot, where's the accent on a single vowel word? Well, of course, there's no such thing really technically in English as unaccented words.
Do you mean stressed, like the word stress?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Accent is another. Yes. The accent can mean like British or
clarify.
American. It can also mean exactly. I'm the same thing. It can also mean the stress on which syllable is also called the accented syllable. Two kind of unrelated meanings of the word. So these short words like in are technically they're stressed. That syllable is stressed. But often when they're said right before another word, it kind of blends in as if it was one word. And that's what you're getting here is the in, an, unusual. If you say them all really slowly, in, an, unusual, like you're talking for a vocabulary video, they sound different than when you say it all together. In an unusual circumstance. It sounds like it's kind of one word. And yeah, this is kind of the blurred line in English. Some languages have an explicit,
this ties
unstressed words.
So this ties in perfectly with the next question, which is from Siti Fatima, who asks, "Can you explain a little bit about connected speech?" So that is connected speech, right? Where we words sort of they're not pronounced as individual words when we talk in a sentence. So one word might be pronounced differently depending on what word comes next.
Yes, exactly. And this is a big part of how words change over time and how we get things like phrasal verbs. Some words change in how they're pronounced or in their meaning when they're paired with certain words. And when that pairing becomes really, really common, you often wind up the original word completely changes.
Yeah. So a good example of that is gonna, I'm gonna, or
gonna,
should have.
Shoulda. How do you say it? Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Yeah.
But also things like will not becoming won't. Over time, that pairing changes the way the words around it were pronounced so much that now that a contraction is just pronounced completely differently from the original pairing.
Yeah, but it's funny how there are sort of official contractions that we teach as proper English, but then there's contractions that go beyond that, like gonna, and because we, as regulars will know, we're writing a English course at the moment which focuses on grammar and the tenses, and we're trying to make it logical or to show the logic that there is in the tenses. And I've been writing recently about the future tenses. So in there we're focusing mainly on will, using will as the auxiliary verb just to show the logic. But there is obviously also, you can also say going to. Which can be contracted as gonna. I'm gonna. Yeah. So
I'm gonna meet you later.
Yeah.
Instead of I will meet you later or I am going to meet you later. Yeah, it all kind of contracts, right?
Yeah. So it's funny how there are sort of official contractions, but then there's unofficial contractions. But I guess that's how all of the contractions started out. They're just very common
Yes.
things we say. We get a bit lazy and it comes out in a shortened form, but people understand, so they've stuck. And that's where the contractions come from. And I think that's also where all irregular verbs have come from. Because if
Absolutely.
you notice, the irregular verbs are always the verbs we use the most. And they're always,
Yes.
and the more we use them, the more irregular they are. You know, the verb to be is the most common verb, and it's the most irregular verb.
It's irregular in ways other verbs don't even have irregularities.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And what's happening here is, again, we've talked a lot on this channel about, why doesn't English have an official form the way some languages like French do? There is no Academy English that defines what correct English is for everyone. And what's happening here is the kind of officials who write dictionaries and write grammar books and write ESL curriculum are really, they're historical and conservative at heart. They want to slow down changes, or they want to write rules instead of trying to keep up with the constantly changing English or language. And this is true in most languages that have some kind of an official or unofficial authority, like the Oxford Dictionary or the Webster's Dictionary in English. But in English, like in any language, languages are constantly changing. Connected speech is turning into contractions, or it's forming irregular verbs and all of these things. English is, so you'll find, and again, I remember as a kid looking at words that were allowed contractions and words that were not allowed. I remember reading that you can't say kind of, but you can say kinda. And I was like, why? That doesn't make any sense.
Why can you not say
that
kind
was
of?
Just,
Who says you can't say kind of?
it's just not considered a correct contraction. And again, this was just the opinion of the person who wrote this particular textbook. They probably based their opinion on lots of authoritative statements that have come in the past. But the reality is that language is constantly changing, especially English.
Yeah.
And so that's why some contractions are considered official, and you'll find them in books and dictionaries and textbooks, and others aren't. They might be newer, they might be less well accepted, but ultimately, books and textbooks aren't what define English the way that works in some other languages.
Yeah, I mean,
which makes English a little more challenging, but also kind of pretty cool.
That reminds me of a sort of analogy that I came up with about grammar, and trying to talk about what it is and why it's important, but also why it's not important, or the ways in which it is important and the ways in which it isn't important. And at English Language Club, our philosophy, which is not just with grammar but also with pronunciation and phonetics, is that they're tools. They're tools to be used by us to help us understand the language and communicate better. So, so the question is, how is grammar useful? Because people say, oh, grammar, I don't like grammar, it's complicated and everything. Well, maybe if you feel that way, then, and if it genuinely is, then don't use it. It's not a tool that's going to be useful to you. Because some people do learn, they pick up language naturally, just kind of like a child, which is great. Lucky you if that's the case. But other people, for most of us, for me, using the grammar a little bit is helpful, and we're trying to make it more logical or show the logic that is there in the course we're writing. So going back to what I was saying about grammar, how is it useful? It's like I feel like it's not the foundation that language is built on, because some people might say that is what grammar is. I like to think of the language is not like, it's like a tree it's organic, it's constantly changing and growing, and the grammar is more like a scaffolding that we put, or a ladder that we put up the tree so that we can climb up and look at a little bit of it in more detail to examine it and study it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's not to say that it can't, that things don't change, that things so this is what I mean. This is why I say it's not the foundation. It's something we use to look at and observe and study grammar. Yeah. Okay, so
Great question.
Yeah.
Answer.
So number 1 says, hello, hope you're both fine. I'm fine. Hello to you, number 1.
You too.
A lot, is it one word, like she cries a lot, or 2 words, like, or 2 different words? So that's an interesting question, and that is a very common mistake. I know that I myself have made that mistake a lot. We're writing a lot as one word. I've made that mistake a lot. Yes, people do make that mistake a lot, and writing it as one word, because we do sort of say it and use it as if it is one word, but it's not.
Right.
It is 2 words, which is strange. It is an unusual
thing. The
thing.
strange thing about this word is it's not unique to this
word. This word or these words?
Rare. This word, the word lot.
Okay,
lot.
Right.
The strange thing about the word lot, and there's other words like this. Can't think of another example right off the top of my head, but maybe I'll think of one later. Is that it means something different when it has the article in front of it. So we think of this, we think of, there's a difference between, to cup something, that's a verb, and a cup, right? That's an object. And that's fine, and that's what's happening here with the word lot, but in a little bit more specific way. So lot with the article, a lot, means something different than just the word lot on its own. And so it is one word, it's the word lot, with the word in front of it, which makes it 2 words. So the phrase a lot is the same as the phrase the chair or my house. It's a word with a determiner in front of it that changes its meaning a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's definitely 2 words. There is a word, a lot, that is one word, but it's got 2 L's. It's ALLOT, and it means to give people something.
Yes.
It doesn't have anything to do with a lot of something. Like you can allot people just a small amount of something. It means to kind of give it out to different people.
Yeah, so I think the confusion comes from the fact that lot on its own is not really used. It's mostly used 99% of the time with a before it.
Yes,
as
probably so.
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about lots as a thing. But, if you say, well, I have a lot behind my house, a lot is like a piece of land that doesn't have anything built on it. That's not the same thing as saying I have, for instance, a lot of land behind my house. It means something very different, the phrase a lot. So that's a really tricky one that a lot of people have a problem with. Also because we pronounce it like one word, a lot, right? Yeah. But it is definitely the word lot with the word in front of it. Yeah.
Great. So 2 words. That's the final answer.
2 words.
Okay. So yeah, if you are joining us for the first time, thank you very much for coming. You're very welcome. Seeing some new names. Dudutol from Indonesia. Hello. I hope I pronounced your name right. I'm sure I didn't, but we're always going to forgive us in advance, please, for getting names wrong. But I do like to say people's names.
Yeah. You can always tell us how to pronounce your name if we say it wrong.
Yeah. Especially
we're still going to make mistakes.
If you can write your name in phonetic script in the chat, that'll be awesome.
That'd be pretty impressive, Pete, honestly. Taib Hussein asks, is this correct? He writes a letter as a sentence.
yes, missed that one. Yeah.
That seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah. That's correct. Yeah. He writes a letter.
He writes a letter, but it would need more in the sentence to really make sense in context. Like you would have to say, for instance, he writes a letter every day, to kind of explain why you're using the simple instead of the continuous. Because if you're just trying to say someone is going through the action and they're doing a letter right now, you wouldn't use the present simple. You'd use the present continuous. He is writing a letter. But yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Great.
Lat points out, like talking about you were talking about grammar being like the scaffolding on a tree. In Arabic, the saying words are like leaves and grammar is the branches.
Grammar is the what? So you cut out there. You cut out there for me. So I think you cut out for everyone. Grammar is the what?
Sorry, I was reading Lat's comment. Speaking of tree, in Arabic we say words are like leaves, whereas grammar is like branches.
Yes.
And yeah, that's very similar to the
Yeah.
analogy you were talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Ahmed Yamani says, "What's off in off limits? What does off in off limits mean? Shouldn't it be on limits instead?" So the phrase, so
the
yeah,
word off
limits.
One of the meanings of the word off is past. So we talk about something being offshore, meaning it's either in the water, it's past the coast, like an offshore oil rig, or or means way past the shore, like in another country, like offshore accounts, right? So that's what this means. Off limits means it's beyond the limits.
Yeah.
So on limit would mean like you're right at the limit, whereas off limits means you're past the limit.
Yeah.
So it's not allowed.
But on limit is not a collocation. It's not a phrase that you'll hear very often.
We would say on the line.
Yeah.
If something is right on the line, meaning it could be okay, it could not be okay. It's sort of
or to the limit, maybe.
To the limit.
Yeah.
Yeah. To the limit means you're staying within the limits, but you're going as close to it as you can.
Yeah. So the confusion with the word off limit comes from the unusual meaning of the word off. Off can be used as in different ways.
It means beyond. Past.
Yeah.
That's not always what it means, but that is definitely what it means when you're talking about something that has edges, like the coast or limit.
Okay, so City Fatima says, how to pronounce love and laugh. Now, let me just correct you one thing. When you're asking a question, you need to say, how do you pronounce?
Yes.
I think we might be having some technical issues. Can everyone hear us okay? Let us know if everything's coming out okay.
You froze a little bit for me. I don't know.
Yes. Let's see. Well, hopefully things are going okay. Well, we'll just continue. Is it going okay now?
It seems to be, yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, I was explaining when you're asking a question, how to pronounce love and laugh. That's not a question. You need to use the auxiliary verb if you're writing a question or saying it. Now this is a question that has a question word, so you're correct to start with the question word, but you still need the auxiliary verb when any question: what, where, when, why. So you need to say, how do you pronounce love and laugh, or how is love, or how are love and laugh pronounced? You could say. So yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Then you're using passive.
That would be in a passive. So you're using the verb to be is an auxiliary verb, but because it's passive. So yeah, we're going to get into that in our course as well. Although that's going to be in a later module that we haven't written it yet. So the sort of different ways of writing a question. But actually, no, it does come into the course because our first sort of key idea is how you have the three main structures: positive, negative, or a question. And a question always has to have an auxiliary verb.
Right, and the key to questions is there's always an auxiliary verb, and you move the auxiliary verb to before the subject. There still needs to be a subject. Yeah. So you can take you pronounce the sentence or the statement form, the positive form would be you pronounce love and laugh. Then you turn it into a question. It's do you? You put the auxiliary verb in and you put it before the subject. So do you pronounce love and laugh? But then you're not asking a yes or no question. You want to ask using a question word. So then you put in how in front of that. How do you pronounce love and laugh? Yeah.
Yeah. So
it all fits that same structure. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we sort of hijacked. Well, wait a minute. We kind of hijacked the question there. City was asking about how to pronounce. How do you pronounce love and laugh? And yeah, so it's interesting because they are similar words. Obviously, they both start with l, the L sound. But then the rest of it is different but similar. So love is and laugh is R. So and R. And then they end, love ends with a V, the V, and laugh ends with a F. So love and laugh.
Which the only difference between those last two is whether it's voiced or not, right? Love, laugh, love, laugh.
Yeah. They're
one of those pairs,
consonant pairs. Yeah. Great. Okay. So what was the next question? Bao bao.
So bao bao. Actually, I think you asked this question before, and we didn't have time to answer it. So I'm glad you asked it again.
Yes.
The words direct, either, and neither, they all have an I form and an E form. Sorry, an if form and an I form. I'm not sure if that's quite right, but which one do you prefer? So what you're talking about is that these words all have multiple pronunciations. You can direct, or you can direct, or you can say, rather. You can say direct, or you can say direct. You can say either or either. You can say neither or neither. So there are some differences here. Direct, for instance, that's not quite one where it's about whether it's a verb or not, because the direct path and directing traffic are pronounced like I direct traffic, the direct path. There might be a little bit of that stress on the first syllable versus the second syllable for a noun or a verb, but it's very minor, and neither of those is the long pronounced like direct. So when do we use direct instead of direct?
I don't think there is a rule. Maybe there is a tendency that when it's a verb, you say direct, and when it's an adjective, you say direct. But that's not the rule. It's just a trend.
No. Right. And there's other reasons. Like people say it for emphasis. And like you're going direct to whatever.
Yeah. But also it ties in with connected speech, I think, because it depends on what words you come up either before and after. But I think probably the biggest factor is just general local accent, what your regional variation in how we speak.
So either and either, neither and neither, again, these are both okay. Some of it's going to be accent differences. And it's not even going to be consistent. Like I kind of naturally tend to say either, but I say neither instead of neither. So it's just really kind of, it's not specific, I think. So there isn't a preference. There isn't one that's better.
Yeah, so I would say if you're worried about these two words and pronouncing them correctly, or not these two words, but the correct ways of saying them. Just learn the different ways of saying them, and it doesn't matter which one you use. When you're speaking, just use the one that's easiest. So often, absolutely. So many of the things that we do in English, the origin of why we do them is just because it's easier physically. We always talk about how pronunciation is physical, and some sounds are difficult to make after other sounds. This is why we have the words a and an apple, a policeman, or a banana, and an apple. It's because it's very difficult to say. What would it be? Apple. Because you have to sort of stop.
Yes.
Whereas if you add the n, you can kind of you can tie it in more. So again, it's like connected speech. Just learn the two correct pronunciations, and then just get into the habit of just saying whichever one is easiest.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see.
Another one is if you. A key here is also just pay attention to what the people around you are saying. Because that's generally going to be what's going to work the best for most pronunciations. If you're in an environment where you're listening to English speakers and they pronounce a word that's in a way that's different from the way you learned it, just you can try to model it after them. But again, for the most part, do what's easiest. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Now, a question here from Win. I've heard the sentence, "If you could cook for me, it would be great." And then if plus something plus could. So
Plus
is that-
subject. Yeah.
Oh, plus subject. Yeah. Yeah. If you could. Yeah. So yeah, that's correct. That's right. So what does that?
That is fine. The key here that might be tricky is, this is the if part, even though it comes first, is the dependent clause. So it makes it seem like the kind of the main verb of the sentence is could cook, but really it's would be great is the main verb of the sentence. It would be great, and then they're tacking on the dependent clause, if you could cook for me, because this is all subjunctive, optional. But you can also put the if clause first, and so that's why it seems a little bit trickier than what it is. The fact that if is added to the beginning of it doesn't change the structure of subject and auxiliary verb with like you could.
Now that's technically a conditional, isn't it? If you could
Yes, definitely.
do something, that would be great.
And then the would be great is a subjunctive, so it's a bit of a 6 1/2 dozen sort of a situation, which means it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but actually, this is the way that we would use this is not like a conditional, because obviously,
Exactly.
this is another way that being indirect is a way of being polite and or nice. So if I'm like a leader of a team and I need people and I want to ask somebody to do something, I'm not just going to say, "You do that, do this, do that, cook for me." I would say, "Oh, if you could do this, that would be great," or "Would you mind doing this?" So it's just being indirect is a way of being polite, and I think this is an example of using a conditional to be less direct.
You're basically saying, "Would you please cook for me?" by being indirect.
Yeah. Well, you may be. I mean, it may be. It depends on the context, but yeah.
Yeah, it does. One day we should talk about levels of request, but that's sometime we're actually planning on tackling subjectives and optionals because they can be their own.
One day we'll make a video on that, and then we'll do a live stream where we can answer people's questions.
Yeah, for sure, because a lot of people do have questions about that.
Yeah, great. So then AJ asks, what's the difference between preclude and include?
Well, they're really opposites. Preclude means to leave out, so you block something; it doesn't come in. Include means you let it in. So they're opposites here.
Yeah, it's funny though, because it's like, it's following the normal rules of word construction, where with the prefixes, pre and in. But clude, we don't really use clude as a word normally. Yeah,
I mean, off the top of my head, I don't even know. I have no idea what the root of that is.
Yeah.
It sounds familiar, but I can't think of it. This is also weird because we tend to think of the in prefix as being something that's more negative, and pre is something that's more positive. And in this case, they're kind of the opposite. Preclude means to not let something in, and include means to let something in, because these words aren't quite based on the same root structure that is more common in English. So it's a bit of an odd one.
And also, include is a very common word that a lot of people will use all the time. But preclude, not so much. It's not so commonly used. We would use the phrasal verb, leave out. Far more commonly.
Much more. Include is totally fine. Leave out is definitely more common than preclude,
Yeah. Great. Okay, so Frank gives us lots of thumbs up and claps, so thank you very much, Frank. And Fatima, I think, is waving. That's great. And let's see. Any other good comments? Ooh, what's happening?
Some more minimal pairs from Nguyen.
Yeah. So it's difficult for me to pronounce torn and tone and ton. 8 and aid. Okay. Let's go through these then.
8 and 8 are homophones. Like they are pronounced exactly the same way. 8 and 8. And the only difference there with the aid is the
end.
The voiced consonant at the end.
Yeah.
Right. So 8, no voice at the end. Aid, voiced at the end. Yeah. So that one's straightforward, if tricky.
Yeah. So torn and tone. So this is the vowel in the middle that's different.
Yes.
Or and o.
And ton.
And ton. Ah. So or,
So
o, and ah.
Or, o, and ah. Yeah, they're all very, very close. But those. Can we show the pronunciation chart?
Yeah.
Because that. Those should be right next to each other.
You'll disappear, but
Yeah. Goodbye.
Oh, I've disappeared as well.
Oh no. Someone needs to point.
Yeah. So I'll bring us back, and I'll try and fix that.
Okay.
You keep talking while I have a look at what's going on.
Let's maybe move ahead to the next question, and then we'll
come back
to this one.
Yeah.
So Lolly Lolly saying hello from France. Good to see you again. Let's see. Nguyen has another question: is when we use in proportion or in proportion to? Fortunately, this one is a pretty simple answer. You use in proportion to if there's something else that comes after. In proportion, that just kind of ends the idea. So you could say, so for instance, I'll say instead of in proportion, I'll say out of proportion. You could say, that argument was all out of proportion. You're just saying that the proportions weren't right. Whereas if you say that person's argument was out of proportion to the importance, so they were arguing the proportion of argument to actually the importance of the argument was off. So anytime you're going to say in proportion to something, you use the word to. If you're not saying what it's proportion with, then you just say in proportion. They have a slightly different meaning, but it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, so
good question.
Yeah, I think I fixed the phonetic chart now, so I will appear on the screen. So there we go. So the question the words we were talking about, remind me, torn. Let me just search if I can find
tone, and ton.
Yeah. So or is this symbol here. So it's or. And then O is a diphthong sound. So O, I think it's this one, O, because it starts with the sort of sound and then moves to the sound. O, or is it? Yeah, it's that. Yeah, that one. O.
Yeah.
And then which is the one that looks like an upside down V.
Mm-hmm.
So or, O, and okay, so yeah, I hope that's helpful. Whoops, my earpiece is
pretty much the same in American English, except with the word torn, obviously we pronounce the R more strongly, torn. But again, pretty much the same. We've had some good minimal pairs today already.
Yeah, great questions. We've talked a lot about.
Tony Patino said they never expected a live stream from this channel. In a way, I never did either. So I certainly never expected to be in a live stream.
Yeah, it's funny how it happened. It was, and it's to do with the current state of the world, which is in a bit of a mess. That we got together and started writing Inside English, and then I don't know why we decided to just start doing live streams to, I guess, try to get people to make people aware that this course is coming, and it's taken us a lot longer to write the course than it should have done, or than we thought, and that's mostly my fault. So we've just sort of continued doing these live streams. I think because we've enjoyed doing them so much, and we've built this sort of. We're continuing to develop this regular group of people who keep coming back, and I really enjoy helping you guys out and talking to you once a week, and
we love answering your questions.
Yeah, so that's why we kept doing it. I don't know why you never expect us to do it though. That seems I don't know, but I guess
it seemed like that kind.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the videos we've done in the past, although I've always tried to make videos that will always be relevant, so that it's not that I upload them, get lots of views, and then a year later no one's interested. It's the things that we make videos on are sort of as true now as they were 4 years ago when we actually made some of them, and people are still trying to learn about the phonetic symbols and what is the chart all about, why does it make sense, and I think that's why the channel's done well. But on the flip side of that is that we've kind of gone through waves of producing producing videos, with quite long gaps in the middle sometimes where we haven't made any new videos, and that probably may always be like that. But it would be good. That's why doing these live streams are good, because it's a good way of having something regular, some regular contact. And so with the actual uploads, the actual videos are more, to specific points, and we'll make them when we feel we've got something to say, rather than, yeah.
Though I think the kind of general philosophy of the channel has really changed, has influenced what these live streams have become, because we initially were mainly wanting to, kind of this be a news thing. Like we wanted to explain what the ideas for Inside English were, and tell people that that's what we were working on. But really, and that would have been, kind of content that wouldn't be useful years later. But what it has turned into is, just questions and answers, or talking about specific things that are going to be useful, in the future as well. So that's interesting. We apparently have a bit of a thing against making content that isn't going to be useful in the future.
Yeah, well, I don't why. I think it's much. There's plenty that we can talk about that will always be important and always be relevant, and people will always be asking those questions that we can answer. So why make videos about anything else? Why make videos about stuff that is just going to be here today and gone tomorrow? That's why we don't sort of make videos about politics or sports or things like that. Although some in some ways it's good. It's a good way to bring in vocabulary. I don't think if I start talking about current sports events like the World Cup or something, if that was on, to talk about certain vocabulary, then it kind of means that 5 years later, those videos, although they are still relevant, they're kind of not, because of the framework that they're in. So I try to always frame things in a way that, or we will always try and frame things in a way that they'll always be relevant. Yeah. So great. Let's see. Any other good questions? When will we use in proportion, and in proportion to? So in proportion or in proportion to?
That was the one we talked about while you were working on the.
Right. Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Background. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, by the way, on pronunciation of prepositions, of and off, the first one, off, is like a V, and off. Well, let me. I'll go. I'm going to bring you back the phonetic chart again. So
between of and off. Yeah.
Yeah. So off is this symbol here. This is the o. Now that's slightly different in American pronunciation, because the American version of this chart actually doesn't have that symbol, because they say more like ah.
So we would just say off.
Off, which is more like this symbol. In reality, it's kind of between the two, because
it is between, because when you say it, it's not exactly right.
Is it not?
It is between the two. I think we have close to the same sound, but we're pronouncing it in a softer way. Because those words are pronounced a little bit differently than just the ah sound.
Right, but the key is that when you say it, although it's a distinctive physical position of the mouth that is different.
Right.
So when we say
yes.
it's like that. Whereas when you say ah, it's different. You know what I mean?
think it's very close though.
Yeah, it is very close. But so what was it? Of and off. So
of and off, yeah.
Of. So they're both this sound. They both start with this sound. But then one of them is the v, and then the other one is f. So those are what would we call them? Paired consonants. So of, and off. So the v is voiced and the f is not voiced. That's the only difference. So that's why they are confusing, I guess, because they are minimal pairs. There's only that one tiny difference, which is that one is voiced and one is not. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. So yeah, keep these questions coming in. We've got 10 likes so far. So if you are watching and you are enjoying it, please give us a thumbs up. That would be awesome. That really helps to get the message out. Let's see. What other questions have we got? Question about adjectives. Why is it camp base and not base camp?
And I think they have this backwards because they do it correctly.
Okay.
Later. So yeah, why do you say base camp instead of camp base?
Right. Okay. So why do we base camp base?
So Ahmed Yamani here. The rest of the question, they go on to say, I heard that this has to do with the order of the English alphabets. Yeah. So the B comes before the C, and so it's base camp that is correct.
Oh no.
It is true that base camp is correct, but it has nothing to do with the order of the English alphabet.
No.
It has to do with adjectives in English. Adjectives almost always come before the word they describe. So you have the red car, not the car red. And yes, that's opposite to the way it is in many, many languages. But in English, the adjective always comes first. The reason base camp is confusing is because both the word base and camp could be the main word. But it's not a base where you camp. It's a camp that is your base. So base is the adjective. That's why it comes first. That one's tricky. The rule about adjectives always coming first is pretty straightforward.
But it's confusing because in other languages it is often different. And that could be the reason this is confusing.
But at least that rule is very consistent. It's fairly consistent in English.
One of the things I'd really like to do a video on one day is order of adjectives, because it can get quite complicated obviously when you've just got one adjective and one noun, it's very simple. Adjectives almost always come first. But when you want to describe something with 3 or 4 adjectives, there is a correct order. You can't just put them in any order. And you
can't say the red old rusty car. I mean, you could, I suppose, but that's not.
But it's really when I first sort of read about this, it was fascinating because I already knew it, but I didn't know that I knew it. But I just, as a native speaker, the way that I've learned English naturally, it sounded right to say them in a certain way, and it sounded wrong to say them in another way, even though I hadn't ever thought about it. So when I actually did think about it, it was really interesting. So yeah, I'd like to do a video about that one day.
And going back to the analogy of like grammar as a tool, and again, you'll get arguments on people as to, so for instance, the fact that you knew that rule, subconsciously, and you used it correctly, some people will say that's the grammar of the language, the fact that you knew to do this as a native speaker. Other people will say, well, no, we came along and we wrote a rule to describe that, and that's the scaffolding, right? The difference between calling the grammar the branches and calling the grammar the scaffolding. And you'll get arguments in linguists groups about this all the time, but fortunately, we're not linguists. And so to us, the grammar is, especially the rule. No one way back when said we're going to create English this way. Adjectives comes first. Just in your face, French. No, that didn't happen. It just changed over time, and someone came along and wrote a rule to describe that.
Yes, and we can use that rule as a tool. It's not
exactly.
It's not illegal to break that rule, and I'm sure there are cases where we do that. We do break that rule. Can't think of any off the top of my head, but yeah. Now, Susanta's got a long list of words that are very, very similar in pronunciation. So, shot, shoot, shirt, shut, short, and shout. How do you pronounce these words? So yeah, again, it's always because they all end with a T and start with a sh, and that's or with a t, and so they start with a sh and end with a t. It's just different vowels or different vowel sounds in the middle.
And this is a really good way to practice the different vowel sounds. Pick the same starting letter or sound, the same ending sound, and pronounce as many different vowel sounds as you can, even if they're not real words. Just because practicing the vowel sounds as they come out of different sounds and go into different sounds will help you get those vowel sounds right. So this is a good way to practice.
Yeah, it's a great list of words. So we got o, u, or, and ow. So they're mostly vowels, but then you do have that one diphthong in there in the ow.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, interesting. Bao says awesome. Thank you very much. The difference of at the end and in the end. So what is the difference between at the end and in the end?
I would say that they're the same, except that in the end is also an idiom for just like the result of something.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's all the same in the end. They don't mean at the end of time this won't matter, although that's true too. They're just saying that the result is that it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So in the end is no, people don't say, well, at the end it doesn't matter as often. It's mainly the in the end as the idiom. But if you're just literally talking about the end of something, either one will work. It's kind of a collocation thing, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, I think there is a slight difference in meaning, or maybe in use. I'm just struggling to put my finger on it. At the end, I think in the end, it can be more as if you're just accepting your fate, accepting what is going to happen. Whereas at the end is more practical.
So you describe in the end sort of as kind of after the effect. So you could talk about, for instance, at the end of the movie, they play the credits. You're talking about like at that point. Whereas you might say, you wouldn't say in the end of the movie they play the credits. You might say in the end of the movie everyone is happy, right? So you're not talking about the physical end of the movie. You're talking about after the events of the movie. And I think there is a bit of a subtle difference here in terms of, at is more talking about a place. In this case is more talking about a state, the not when it's happening, but after this event kind of thing. It is subtle, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so they are very, very similar in meaning. Yeah. Ahmed says, this is great. I'm learning so much from you guys. Thank you so much. Well, you're very welcome. We really enjoy, as we were saying, we really enjoy doing these. That's why we've kept doing them every week. So
thanks for your questions. Without it, we wouldn't have anything interesting to talk about.
Yeah, please give us a thumbs up if you haven't already. I see we are up to 12 now, so that's great. So watching and tell your friends that we're here every week, and they can join us too. We've still got a few more minutes, so let's keep going. Which one is correct? Win says, which one is correct for using in winter or on winter? In winter,
yeah.
In winter, yeah. Or you could say at. Yeah. Can you say at the winter? No. At winter time.
During winter.
Yeah, during winter.
But we wouldn't say on.
No.
Yeah.
And we often say in the winter. In the winter. In the winter, I like to visit my grandmother. We always visit my grandmother in the winter. I think that might be a slight variation between British English and American English. That American English, you miss out the in winter.
Not necessarily. I think it might be more acceptable. I think both are both.
Yeah.
You hear both, for sure.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I write in pen or I write with pen, ink or biro, pencil, etc. Yeah. I write in pen or write with pen. Well, that depends. So if you say I write in pen, then you're referring to what you've written. whereas if you write with a pen, you're talking about the pen. So
exactly. So
they're both correct.
You could say I wrote my name in pen, but you wouldn't say, hold on a second, I'm going to write this in pen. You would say I'm going to write this with a pen, but then you talk about something that you're going to written. You're right, or I guess you wouldn't say it with this, but if you ask someone, do you write with a pen or with a pencil? You wouldn't usually ask, do you write in pen or do you write in pencil? But when you're talking about what you wrote, you could use in. Yeah,
so they're both correct. They're just
they're both correct.
Slightly referring to different things.
Slightly.
Yeah. But there's some overlap.
When in doubt, say with the, because that's going to be acceptable in pretty much, or with a. That's going to be acceptable in pretty much any situations, whereas in pen isn't always going to work.
Yeah. Camis says hello from Egypt. I don't think I've seen you before, so that's great. You're very welcome here. I hope you become a regular. We're here every Tuesday at this time. So Ahmed says, is it okay to replace the N in include with the unvoiced NK, kind of similar to ing pronunciation, but with NK? What's the unvoiced NK?
So, like describing, the difference between saying like sing, you've got that sound that's not quite the same as an N and a G. Same for like bank or think. You've got that sound before the K.
Because
I would say no. You don't say include. You say include.
Include.
You don't include something. You include it.
Yeah. Is it okay to replace the N with? So
basically, is the question: do you pronounce it include or include?
Actually, yeah. Now I think I know what you're getting at here, because I think people do say include.
You do hear both, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question.
But the correct pronunciation would be include.
Include.
Include. But yeah, I think some people would say include. Okay. Hope that was helpful.
Miriam is saying hello from Georgia, Sakartvelo. That's interesting. I was just reading about where we get the word Georgia in English. Apparently, it's obviously a Greek word, but it apparently is a Greek word that the Greeks made up from a third party. Someone in Armenia, maybe, they were asking, well, what's over there? And they said whatever the word was in their language, and the Greeks wrote it as Georgia. So it's a kind of a third-hand word for the country there. So that's an interesting one. This doesn't just happen in English; this happens all the time. But still fun. It's always been funny to me how the English word for a country might be nothing like the word that those people use to describe their own country. It's pretty funny. But either way, you're very welcome to the channel.
Yes. So we've got a question. What false conditional? What does that mean? Can you explain? Now, false conditional. This is definitely not something that comes up very much.
It's part of the same conditionals. This is the if only I had known, right? And it's a kind of conditional where you're saying something that did not happen, like right. If only I had known. Because
we've got the first conditional, second conditional, third, and then there's the zero conditional. This is the problem. Is it just another word?
It's different depending. Yeah.
It's just another word for one of those.
Those. I'm not a big fan of those naming conventions because they're different depending on what textbook you use.
Right.
And they don't line up with some things in other languages. So that's a name for a specific one of those. I don't remember. It's a subset of one of the numbered ones, but. Not a hugely important concept, but that's what it is. If you say if I had known, I would have done differently, or whatever.
Right. So it means it's when you're talking hypothetically, and I guess grammatically you're sort of it's referring to when you're talking with the past tense form. If I would, I would. Past perfect. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
if
yes,
I
you use the past perfect for the false conditional with some other past tense form. So if I had known, I would have done differently. Is both past perfects.
Yeah. So this is unusual uses of tense or of the past perfect tense, which I think is one of the things that makes tense seem more complicated. And this is in our course English Inside English, we may get onto this kind of thing, but we're really sort of focusing on the way that the language does make sense and is logical. So we're sort of leaving things like that to one side, just so that you can strip away those layers, and we can show you at the core the logic that there is there to help things make sense. So that was a good one. It's funny, I've always used those number terms for the conditionals, which you say you don't like, and I think I agree with you actually. If there is inconsistency in how they're published,
it's frustrating, and this is part of what's frustrating about grammar is so often you learn a list of rules, and sometimes the rules have names. Like, for instance, the 9 or 12 tenses, and some books will say only 7 tenses. It's really weird and complicated. Whereas if you look at the underlying parts of it, suddenly it all kind of makes sense. And that's the way I prefer to look at things, is find the underlying truth to it.
It's like going back to first principles.
I haven't really taken a good look at conditionals in a while, since I was learning Greek, actually, to really feel like I can remember those underlying principles. But one of these days we'll have to take a look at it. Maybe we can demystify conditionals. But that's interesting, because that's not something we've talked about much. We've talked a lot about how grammar and tenses are made complicated by all the different sort of tangents that are genuine different rules and things that happen in the language. But it's also true that it's made complicated by the fact that the same things are referred to by lots of different terms, and some people get the same terms the other way around, and things like that. So it's very confusing. So let's see. There's also day one and one day. So those are two expressions that are used that are very different meanings. Totally different things.
Yeah. Do you want to? One day. Day one is like the beginning. Day one, the first day of doing something. But one day we say, one day I would like to visit Australia. So in one day it's like in the future, but day one is the start of something. On day one of my job.
Yes.
Go on.
And you'll also hear phrases like day zero or 0 day. They basically mean the same thing as day one. It means at the very beginning. 0 day kind of sometimes refers to like even more in the beginning, like the very moment, but it really doesn't matter. They all pretty much mean the same thing. Day zero, 0 day, day one. They mean at the beginning of something.
Yeah.
And those are
so we'll have to end this soon, but there's an interesting question from English Made Easy. It says, hi, can you explain the different sounds that Y can make, or the letter Y? What is the best way to sound this letter, as it's sometimes considered a vowel and sometimes a consonant, and used in a diphthong? Thanks, it's great to interact. Yes, great to interact with you too. So I mean, with all the vowels, I mean, in terms of, Y is, when we talk about vowels in the alphabet, we think of A, E, I, O, and U, and then Y is not included, but it is often a vowel, and I guess it's because vowels are not letters in the alphabet; they are sounds. And the letter Y from the alphabet is used to represent some of vowel sounds sometimes. So off the top of my head, I'm not going to be able to cover this completely, but just in I guess
it is in the pronunciation videos though.
So
go back and watch those.
But as a vowel, it's normally I.
It doesn't have its own vowel sound.
No,
It
no.
uses other vowel sounds. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I. But then it's normally y.
And as a consonant, it makes the sound that a J makes in a lot of languages, or in different languages make the sound using different letters.
The J
in
makes
English, it's
the J makes in the phonetic on the phonetic chart,
Yes.
which I will
exactly.
show you down there in the corner. Where is it? There we are. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't think we can cover this in a useful depth just off the top of our heads.
Quickly.
So we'll leave that there. But yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, check out my video on the y sound. Probably might talk about that. I can't remember really. But yeah, it was probably could be worth doing a video just on the letter Y and how it can be represented phonetically in different ways. Okay, so I think we're going to have to end it there. But yeah, if we didn't get to your question, we will try and get to it next week. But yeah, and by all means, ask again next week, because I like it. Like earlier on, somebody had re-asked a question that we didn't get around to in a previous question. Yeah. If you have enjoyed this and if you have found it useful, please give us a thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. And that way YouTube will tell you when we're live again. But before it tells you, I can tell you that we are live at this time almost every week. So I hope.
So far, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.